We believe that wealth is a journey, and that this is your jumpstart to trading success. Hello everyone, and welcome to another edition of the Trader's Mindchat Show, where we believe that wealth is a journey and that this is your jumpstart to trading success. I'm Mike.
And I'm Melissa, and we have an amazing show planned for you guys today. We are going to be talking about trading fears, where they stem from, and how you can combat them so that it doesn't dictate your own trading. So one of the quotes I was reading, Mike, is actually from Danzinger.
Okay.
And he says, any news that you read during the trading day is intended to make you lose. Do you agree with this statement?
I think that it depends. I think that it depends on the individual. So in case you don't know who Danzinger is the world record holder for swing trading. He was able to turn $10,000 into, I think it was 18 million in the span of about 2 years back in the dot-com bubble. But back to the question of any news that you read during the trading day being intended to make you lose, I think that that's reflective of his beliefs, and I think that for me, it's one where I tend not to look at much news or headlines or things like that during the trading day, because I perform my best when I plan ahead, right? So after the market is closed, I'll see what happened, and I'll come up with a game plan of what I'm going to execute on the next day. And then when the market is open the next day, my only job between 9:30 a.m. and 4 p.m. Eastern, when the market closes, is to simply execute that plan. Anything else outside of that is a distraction.
Yeah, because I think we forget that the news triggers our core fears. And I think that we have to kind of keep that in mind as we are listening to the news, as we are checking our phones or checking social media, that these headlines are meant to trigger something within us for these core fears, whether it's fear of poverty, fear of ill health, fear of criticism. So there's all these type of basic fears that they are trying to draw us in and make us, become a little bit even more fearful.
Right. Headlines are designed to get attention. Like, being informative is secondary.
Mm-hmm. Which is unfortunate that's the case, but this is the day and age that we live in, that they need to get viewers. Basically, that's what they're after.
But at the same time, there's also traders that trade based off of headlines to see, like, well, which way the market's moving. Like, so I think that the first step is to figure yourself out, figure out your trading system, figure out what your trading beliefs are. Right, like that. That's one of the big reasons why we wrote the Mindshift guide. Well, it was to figure out, well, what are my trading beliefs? If your trading beliefs are, well, I need to trade the headlines, and not only that, being aware of headlines leads to positive results, then yeah, like absolutely, you should do that. Now, when I look at my trading beliefs and my system, that's something that I don't want to be a factor at all for me. So that's why for me, it's noise, whereas for somebody else, it might be crucial.
And you mentioned the other day that you were actually, you had to stop yourself because you started listening to some of these gurus or some of these trading masters, right? And it's so hard not to. For any profession, whether it's trading, even being an author, you look at other people who've already gotten to where you want to be, and so it forces you to kind of like second guess yourself and say, wait, should I be making this move? Should I be going with this type of editor? Should I be making this trading decision?
Yeah. Like, so the more of the direct thing that I was saying was sometimes, and still to this day, I'll catch myself sometimes where there's people that I've studied, that I respect greatly, people that have been on the show, people like Mark Minervini, people like Jim Ropel, people like Patrick Walker, just to name a small handful. And sometimes, if I'm getting ready to post something on Twitter and I see what somebody else has to say about an idea, and my idea might be a little bit different from theirs. Oh, well, Mark's a U.S. investing champion, and he has 40 years of experience. I have 20 years of experience. Should I weigh what he says a little bit more? And I used to I used to fall into that all the time. Very similar with O'Neill. Very similar when I was in the IBD meetups, and I would have an idea, and one of the senior leaders would have an opposing idea, and I would just toss my own ideas and default to what somebody else was saying.
So is this based off of a fear? Or is it just based off of inexperience at that point? You're still trusting the advice of your mentors. So how to trust your own instincts? Like, how do you know that you should go for it, or do you wait, take a breath, or see what these other people are doing first? Is that more detrimental?
It's interesting. Eventually, I think a baby bird needs to learn how to jump out of the nest and flap its wings, right? And I think that there's a fear there that what happens if I start to fall? Well, what happens if I hit the ground face first? Um,
Sometimes you do have to learn the hard way.
yeah, I
That is
think
true.
that I think that having people around and having a great environment are ways to speed up a learning curve, but I think that there's an element of pain in any type of growth. There's an element of being uncomfortable in any type of growth. Like, yes, well, we want to, one of the goals with the service that we have with Mara is to make the process be as quick and as pain free as possible. But that doesn't mean that it's completely pain free. If a tree is going to grow outdoors, it needs to push through rock and earth, and it's not comfortable, right? But if it wants to grow into a full fledged tree, that's what it's got to do. If we want to become full fledged traders, then yes, well, we will have to encounter losses. There's a difference between reading something in a book and experiencing it for yourself. Going through a course versus actually applying that knowledge. It's learning at a different level, and
Yeah, I think mirroring success is important. I think that that's not what we're trying to say. That
well,
it's very
well,
important.
modeling success.
Modeling success is important, especially if you're a beginner, because you want to make sure that you are not missing any of the pieces to the puzzle as you're building your own routine and your own trading
Yes, that's
routine and
true.
your system. But when you get to a certain point where you are doing this on your own and you're finally, like I said, you're the little bird about to leave the nest, you don't want to keep stepping back and not taking that first leap because you're afraid. I think this keeps coming back to fear. It's like you're fearing failure, you're fearing not making the right decision, like the imposter
Or that
syndrome.
somebody else
Who
has
am
a
I
better
to know?
decision.
Yeah, but and that could happen too. Somebody else could have a better decision. But if you are going to be stuck in the nest, you're never going to be able to flap those wings and fly and soar. You're always going to be right back to where you started.
Yeah, I think that, part of what helps you figure out the step to take is to figure out what the goal is, right? So if your goal is to flap your wings and fly on your own, eventually you're going to have to do it. If your goal is to, just kind of follow what somebody else does forever, and some people might have that, right? Not everybody wants to be a world class trader at this. Some people want to get to a certain level, have most of the work done for them, and that's okay too. But having clarity on what the goal is helps us determine the path to take to get there.
And the only way to really do that is to do the homework and really do the belief exercises to really figure out what those goals are for you. Nobody else can tell you what your goals are. You have to figure that
or
out for
what your goals
yourself.
should be, right? And that's something else that I learned the hard way too. If you don't come up with your own goals, like people will give you what your goals should be, right? Like
Oh,
who's in
go into that a
charge?
little bit more. Yeah, who's in
Yeah,
control?
like who's in charge here? You or somebody else, right? If you're not setting your own path, somebody else will be glad to do it for you, and it's not necessarily going to be in your best interest.
Yeah, I've been there where you think you have to follow the straight and narrow road, get that corporate job, the 9 to 5, and you get your benefits, and yeah, you'll be happy. And then as a mom, trying to balance the commute and running back and forth and not finding fulfillment in what you're doing and not having the time to be with your loved ones, the straight and narrow path was not the right path. It was actually the curved, zigzagging one that you were afraid to take because everyone kept saying, oh, you're going to fail as a writer, you're never going to make it, they don't make any money. I'm sure traders face this too, where people are like, "Are you really sure? Isn't that like gambling?" It's also all those fears, all that self doubt from years and years of doubting. Maybe this isn't the right path, even though I feel like it is. It has to all come to the surface. You have to really figure out if I'm gonna what I'm gonna do with my life.
There was a post on Twitter saying that it takes about 5 6 years to become a doctor. It takes about the same amount of time to become a lawyer. It takes about the same amount of time to become a professional athlete. But to become a trader, I'm just gonna open up an account and go, right?
It's not that simple.
Unfortunately, no, and unfortunately, many of us, myself included, learned that fact the hard way.
But why do you even think it is that simple? Like, where
That's
does that even come from? Like, why would
from
you think it is that simple? Just open a book and now I'm going to be a world class trader.
that's what I think I was taught.
Maybe there were some like a
And
one
not taught.
success story of like, yeah, a person who started trading and all of a sudden made $1 million in a month and everyone thought that they could do it.
No, more and not taught like in a book form or taught from the class form. More taught from environment, right? Investing is like you just put money in and then more money magically pops out the other end given X amount of time, and you just buy a company that you think is going to be around for a really long time, and then people think like, oh man, like if I only would have bought Apple, or if I only would have bought Amazon like back then, and then like trying to think about, well, what's the new one of those today, and then they find widget company, and they put their money in and kind of hope for the best, and then as that progresses down that path, you start to see like, oh, like maybe widget company X isn't as great as I thought that it was. It ran 100% in a couple of weeks, but now it's back down to where I originally bought it. I had the intention of holding this forever, and actually, when we went out for your sister's birthday and we were talking to Tom, uh, I one of the things that he was saying was that I forget which stock that he bought, but he went into it with the intention of holding for a couple of years, and the trade ran like maybe about 200% in like a month or two, and then came like halfway back, ended up cashing out with at least like 100% gain, which is still great, but it continued to fall and it's back down to where it was. So one of the ideas for him is was like, well, did you have a target in mind? No. Well, how about this? Like, what if you have a target and you have like the amount of time, and if the price happens to achieve your target in much faster than the time that you initially thought, great. Then you didn't have to wait several years. You got your results in a couple of months. Great, take that, and then at least bank half of it.
Oh, interesting. So for him, was it more of the that he was more afraid of going out too soon, or more of the fear
It
of like
was a lack of
missing
a
out?
plan.
Oh, lack of a
Yeah,
plan.
lack of a plan. So, yeah, so he's newer to the game too. And if you're listening, Tom, hello.
Hi, Tom.
But yeah, so a newer person getting involved, fan of the show, and is still wants to like, okay, I've got an idea. Let me go after this idea. I heard about it somewhere, but didn't have the awareness yet of what are all the moving pieces that like. So it's what's it called? Unconscious incompetence.
Okay.
Like he doesn't know what he doesn't know. So now he's at that stage where he's starting to become aware of what he doesn't know. Like so, or that he knows that he doesn't know things. So now he's starting to seek out information.
That was like John Maxwell when I took the mastermind class. We were talking about his book. You live and you learn. So it's not you live and you lose. You live and you learn.
Right, right.
Because loss and failure is a part of life, and as long as you learn from those failures, will you be able to succeed and continue to succeed along your path. And he's mentioned that too. That if you make a mistake, but you didn't know it was a mistake, then okay, that's okay. But now if you do know and you make the same mistake again, that's on you because you already made the mistake, you learned from it, and now you're making it again. So it's kind of like taking that step back and realizing, okay, so how do I prevent that from happening again?
Right, and not being afraid for it to happen again too. I think that sometimes we make the same mistakes, and it's very easy to go down the path of like starting to beat yourself up for like, oh man, like I can't believe I did this again, and like uh, being so anger can be a great motivator, but it could like when used properly. But the flip side of that is if you're beating yourself up to the point where you toss in the towel and you quit, like that's or it becomes debilitating, right? Like that, then that's
Yeah, yeah. So
not helpful.
how do you tell, I guess for new traders especially, and even for intermediate traders who have kept making those same mistakes over and over again, how do they conquer that fear of, knowing that, yeah, in trading, you will win and there will be times that you lose, but how do you prepare yourself for those losses, or how do you prepare yourself for the fear of loss?
Yeah, you expect it, all right? Like so you bake as much failure into your plans as you can, all right? So you're not relying on having to win all the time. And, like knowing what your stats are. I look at my stats. Like my win rate fluctuates between 40 to 50%. That means that more often than not, I'm wrong on the trade, right? Like so, I flip the coin. Like most of the time, it's going against me, but I'm still able to come up with great trading results, right? Like last year, I was up about 150%. Uh, how does that happen with a 40% win rate or like a 50% win rate? By having your winning trades be dramatically larger than your losing trades. And understanding too and like going back and reviewing your past trades and coming up with a set of rules to figure out what can help me hold on to a winning trade longer, let's say, right? Like that was a goal of mine, like, and so that's something too, right? So we everyone should figure out what their goals are so that way they could reverse engineer it. How do I get to it? I wanted to be able to hold on to winning trades longer, so I came up with a set of rules that if the trade hits my target that I've come up with, that I'm going to sell half, right? And then from there, let the trade continue to run. If the trade comes back in and it triggers me out some other way, great. Then at least I sold half up here. If the trade continues to run and it keeps on going, right, then thank God that I held on to something, because now instead of taking all my profit here, I'm able to take half here and the other half way up there.
Awesome. No, that's great. And I was just having a thought as you were talking too, because it's talking about getting to where you are. Do you still have fears? And do you think it's more of it's not an elimination of the fears, it's more of an awareness of the fears so that when they do creep up, you know how to handle it better?
Well, what kind of fears are we talking about, right? Like, I think that there's a misconception about fears that, like, oh, we want to eliminate fear. Fear is bad. Like, not all fear is bad, right? Like, so if somebody handed you, like, $1 million and said, like, okay, I want you to close your eyes, walk across a busy highway, like, you should be afraid to do that, right? Like, it's not worth the million. But yeah, like so there's those kind of fears, but and then there's other fears that are maybe counterproductive, right? So maybe assessing it not from a good or bad perspective, but more of like, how does this help me? How does this hinder me?
I love the example of Bob in the Mara Mind Shift Guide, where he didn't even know he had this fear or that this, belief that was hindering his trading. And that it wasn't until like, you kind of helped guided him to realize it for himself that he realized how that belief was actually not serving him, or sometimes how these fears are paralyzing us or they're preventing us from taking that next step. There was an example in this book I'm reading about this person who was afraid of public speaking, like terrified, and how many people say that they're more afraid of public speaking than death.
Yeah, I used to have that fear too.
Yeah, so he was, beyond like I cannot do this, and he was an intern. He was deciding to become a psychiatrist, and he had to speak in front of his class, and he was terrified. And then he started kind of like going through like, I guess, where did this fear come from? And then he kind of was like taking it apart piece by piece. Then he started thinking like, what's the opposite of this fear? So his fear is, I'm afraid I'm going to sound boring. People aren't going to be interested in what I have to say. I started thinking the opposite. Well, I've heard a lot of boring speeches before, so that's not, if they hear one more, what's the big deal? And so I love the humor about it because it's like, okay, the worst thing that happens is that it's another boring speech. Well, that's not the end of the world. And so, he wrote it all out, and he went up there and he read it, word by word. And, somebody afterwards said, hey, good job. It was pretty boring. But you know what? He didn't care because he did it. He got up there, he spoke, and that was like showing his fear that you can't control me. And after that, he kept practicing, and it got better and better. That he was able to do it extemporaneously. Now, then he started speaking for like Barbara Walters and all, mass media. So it was just took that first step of trying to like seeing what is the polar opposite thought that pops up when I have this fear, and realizing that doesn't have to stop me.
Part of from that story, it sounds like preparation helped him through the fear.
Yes, that's very good. Yeah, I didn't even think about that he prepared himself by having the speech written out at first and being able to prepare himself for that event.
And thinking through the possible outcomes. Right, like thinking through the worst case scenario, trying to think, so like thinking of it from his perspective, from the audience perspective, and then again as a neutral observer, right? Like so from his perspective, being afraid to give the talk, from the audience's perspective, they think that it's boring, and then like from that neutral observer's perspective, that like, well, I've heard plenty of boring speeches before. Well, what's one more like? Yeah, like so.
And I love that. I think the next speech after that one, he actually started the speech saying, "I'm probably going to be the most boring person you're going to listen to today," and it got a laugh. And that's when I think he realized, you know what? This isn't as scary as I thought. I think for trading too, a lot of people go into it not knowing what to expect, not having the preparation, like you mentioned. And I think that does create some of these fears because they don't want to lose money, they don't want to look stupid, they don't want to look like they don't know what they're doing.
Right. And so, like, if you just go onto Google and you're like, what do I need to do to prepare to trade? Right, like you're gonna get like thousands of different answers. You go on YouTube and you look like, well, what do I need to prepare? You'll get like different things, and you're probably going to start to be served ads of people telling you like, yo, you need to do this. Like, like there's a basic construct of what I feel is needed, right? And, like that's why what we do and what's written in the book is meant to be a skeleton, right? It's meant to be a template that could be just filled in with what you want, right? And so like that's why I break it down into like 8 core trading skills that are needed to succeed no matter if you're a day trader, a swing trader, long-term investor, like well whatever involvement you want to have, like you need these 8 things, right? And so then the question is, well, what are the 8 things, right? So the trade analysis is always going to be part of it, right? And then we go and start to break down, well, what does trade analysis mean? Some people are using, like not to dive too deep into the weeds on trade analysis because you could do
We could do a whole show on it
yeah, yeah, you
itself,
could
right?
do like an entire people do entire courses on it, right? But like if you're
Yeah.
somebody that's looking at price structure, fundamentals, technicals, those kinds of things, like that's trade analysis. Also bundled into that are like, well, what's the overall market doing, right? If you want to trade with the market, if most stocks trade with the market, then you should have a way to analyze the overall market so that way you know, okay, I'm looking to short a stock, but the market's rallying. Maybe that's a bad idea. And so all that goes into the trade analysis bucket. Then you need to know how to manage the trade, right? So that's a little bit different. That's like the rules, right? Like what's going to get you out of this trade. Um, and that's very important as well. For me personally, I like to have 4 different ways to exit trades. Just did a blog post about that, so go check that out on marawealth.com.
And each of these we go into a little detail within the Mara Mindshift Guide,
Yeah,
but
yeah, that too.
within the Mara Elite program, like you actually dive deep into each of these 8 core trading skills.
Well, yeah, well, we've done a bunch of boot camps about it, but it's also like showing in real time, like what I'm doing and why.
Yeah.
Right. Like so, like my portfolio is an open book. The whole trade analysis is done together every weekend. During the deep dives, people are able to ask questions and get answers like right there and see the process, right? Like it's not about like just taking what I have to say. Like I'm just another guy that's done this for a while. The idea is to see the process in action and then be like, okay, this is a template, and I can begin to do this myself. Like that's what moved me from when I was doing the Investors Business Daily meetups to being a guy in the audience to becoming one of the leaders was like taking what they were saying, figuring it out, like okay, like this is how full-time professionals are doing it. How can I make this work for me as a part-timer back then? And then that's what started to lead to success. So that's what I'm hoping to do with the Elite program.
This is great. And we're going to go into 3 ways that you can start implementing this in your trading right after this quick word from our sponsor.
The sponsor of today's show is Magic Mind. I've been using Magic Mind these last couple of months, and it's a quick energy shot I drink either in the morning or in the afternoon to give me a boost. They only use healthy ingredients, and I think it's great. Check it out for yourself at magicmind.co/discount/MARA15 and use coupon code MARA15 to get 15% off your order.
Welcome back. So we are going to be talking about 3 ways that you can combat fears when you're doing your trading. So Mike, what are those 3 ways that you combat those fears?
Well, the first way is through awareness. Second is going to be through preparation, and the third is action.
Great. So if we're going to be building that awareness, what are ways that we can do that today?
The first part of awareness is to start asking yourself, like, oh, what is what's triggering this fear? So just simply ask, like, why am I afraid? And see, what comes back to you, right? When
you ask yourself a question, you will get an answer, right?
Yeah. Yeah, and so the mind is kind of like a computer, right? You ask it a question, it'll give you an answer. So you want to make sure that you phrase the question in a positive, helpful way, right? Like if you say like, oh, well, why do I keep on screwing this up? Like you might come back with an answer because you're an idiot, right? Like that's
like, thanks, mind.
That's happened to me before.
Oh yes,
it happens to many of us. So frame the question in a helpful, positive way.
What's an
Eh,
example of how you would ask yourself?
Going back to well, what we kicked the show off with, right? Like that, like kind of like a sneaky fear, which was, why am I doubting myself, or why am I looking for uh, other traders that I look that inspire me? Why am I looking at their analysis in the middle of the day?
For like validation almost.
Yeah, like why am I seeking this Right, right, and that's and that's a good
Ah.
answer. Then validation comes back. Okay, well, why am I seeking validation? And then
You don't
it
trust
starts to go
yourself.
down that
Go down the
path,
rabbit hole. Look at that.
and it goes very quickly when you ask the right question
Sometimes, remember the
or the
book we
right series
mentioned,
of
like,
questions.
was it 8 layers deep? You want to kind of seek that, like, keep asking why, almost like a toddler, like you're asking
Yes.
why, because the first answer may not be the
Yeah,
correct
yeah, it's
answer.
yeah, like you're peeling back the layers of an onion, right?
Yeah,
Like,
because validation, it wasn't really validation. Maybe it was a more deeper rooted fear that you didn't even realize was holding you back because you needed your justification from your elders or from parents. Maybe it
uh,
stemmed from as far
it
back as childhood.
yeah, it could go
I
back
don't
that
know.
far, like
I don't
absolutely,
know.
but yeah, like so peel back the layers sufficiently to try to get to a root cause.
And write it down too. I realize that
Oh yeah,
sometimes
yeah, like
helps.
and that's important as well, right? Writing is extremely important. Um, I prefer to write with paper and pen. You could type things out if that's what you enjoy, but I think that there's something to paper to pen that's unique, like
I remember
tactile.
Napoleon Hill was saying that too. You don't want to just say it, you want to also write it down. It almost like firms it within your subconscious.
Yeah, yeah. So you gain this awareness about the fears and well, like why they're there, how they're trying to serve you,
Mm-hmm.
right? Because all this stuff, like our minds aren't trying to uh, attack us or to sabotage us. Although sometimes it might feel that way, but like all the stuff, like it's trying to serve us somehow. So also asking the question, like, how is this trying to serve?
That's a great question. Yeah, because you may not even be thinking about that as you're struggling making this trading decision.
Yeah, and like let's say that there was something from early childhood that we end up coming with. Well, how was that serving me back then? Right? Like it may have served us back then and it worked. That's why like it became a habit and it entered our subconscious because it was a habit that we've done for so many years and now it's kind of like on autopilot. But that's how it was serving back then. Is it necessarily still serving now in the way that it's attempting to? Well, no. Okay, then that's what's going to end up beginning to draw energy out of that old belief and pattern and can allow us to reconcile and make new patterns, new beliefs.
Better serving beliefs.
Yes, yes, absolutely.
Absolutely. That's great. So now that you have this awareness, whether it was something from
Yeah.
childhood or just, whatever answer finally came out of that internal dialogue, your next step would be preparation.
Uh,
So what are those steps to prepare yourself?
well, similar to the story that you told earlier, right? Like where you're figuring out different potential scenarios of what can happen. Right. Well, when we're planning out trades, this is exactly what we attempt to do. We begin to figure out which way do we think the trade is going to move? Where are we going to enter? Where are we going to cut our loss if the trade moves against us a certain amount? Where do we think this trade is ultimately going to go? And then coming up with the different ways to manage the trade as it develops. I began to mention earlier about giving myself 4 different ways to exit. So I give myself my profit target. aside from the profit target, I want to use what's called a trailing stop, which means that if price is moving up and then all of a sudden it stops going up and it starts to roll over then and it's losing momentum, I want to start scaling out of that trade. The reason why is because my style is largely based on momentum. I want to be moving while the trade is moving up. If it starts to lose steam, then I'd rather switch into something that has steam, that has that thrust. So I'm
Makes
turning
sense,
over my
yeah.
portfolio a little bit quicker. Then a third way is what I call a backstop, meaning like if price progresses and then it starts to consolidate, it should not retrace that that consolidation, right? Like it's like you walk up a set of stairs. Now that ceiling is now your new floor. You shouldn't like step in a hole and fall back through, right? Like that. That would be a bad thing. Like if that starts to happen, cut the trade. Like see you later. And then the fourth way is the stop loss, where you're taking a loss on the trade, but you're keeping the loss small.
Alright, great. And then the third way that you combat fear is
Yeah,
by taking action, which I believe if fear is debilitating you, it doesn't want you to take action. So if you're able to really take this step, you're already showing that courage that you're able to move forward,
yeah,
right?
yeah. It takes courage. It takes action, and yeah. So creating awareness, be having like a game plan, right? So that's helping alleviate some of the fears because you now you're still dealing with the unknown, but you're prepared for the unknown. But nothing happens without action. So we still have to take that leap. The baby bird still has to step out of the nest and start flapping its wings. Otherwise, it's just going to sit there. Game planning and being aware of like, like I better flap my wings or I'm going to fall on my face. Like nothing happens without action. So action is step three.
And for some people who are still afraid, even with the preparation, I mean, I know authors who have plotted out their entire book, but they have not taken that first step to actually write chapter one because they're just afraid. So, so what for traders who have taken all those steps, they have their game plan, they're prepared, they have
Well,
awareness of their fear. What else can help them propel them forward?
now, part of it too, with to bring it back to trading, would part of the planning should also include your position size. How much are you going to have at risk? So that way you know exactly like if this doesn't work out, this is how much I stand to lose.
So maybe scaling back their position size will
Right.
help them feel like, okay, I won't lose the house, right? Like I
Yeah, no,
won't,
like you should not be betting that you should.
won't be able to go to college anymore.
So a part of any good trading plan should also include that you're not going to lose your livelihood if a trade goes against you or if a series of trades goes against you. Like you never want to be betting everything on the line. And I think that's actually what causes so many traders to blow up. It causes a lot of fear because people want to get rich overnight. Like that, they see that, yeah, you could make 100% returns. You could have 150% returns, like Mike did. You could have 500% returns, like Andrew did, one of our members. And wow, I want to do that. Great, let's go take all the money that I have and start doing that now, so that way I could start getting out of this job that I hate. I could start helping my family faster, like all these things. But unless if you are fully prepared and have experience, then that's where fear starts to creep in because it's just like, hey, you're not really as prepared as you think you are, and that so fear might be doing a good job of saying, hey, like wake up, like you're not
Yeah, no, I was
ready.
over here back at the party. One of the friends was saying that after the whole GameStop, skyrocketed, they were like, "Oh, I should have put my whole down payment in that."
Really, dude? Somebody said that?
Yeah, and I was like, at the back of my mind, I was saying, but what if it didn't do that? So this is all in hindsight. Of course, we know what ended up happening, but I can see some people maybe seeing something, maybe not having the education, not knowing, maybe making a move like that, saying, well, I could take this 80,000 and it'll turn into 180,000, or I'll be able to buy the house without having to get a mortgage. But I can see that's when things could and badly because they haven't thought it through. Like, what if it takes a
Right, that's
wrong
when
turn?
greed starts to take over, right?
Mm.
And then like you're not in that scenario, yeah. Like, did you prepare well? Like you're taking action, right? Like, so you really need those three things, right? Like, so taking action without being prepared gets you into a situation where you just mortgaged your house and you're in not GameStop, but you're in something else, and uh-oh, it didn't quite work.
Mm.
Now what? Oh, well, it's got to come back, right? And that's where people tend to dig in their heels, and sometimes they even like double down on a bad situation. Been there, done all that. Like I haven't bet the mortgage, but like thankfully,
Thank God.
yeah, thankfully, well, like I learned those
We'd be
mistakes.
doing this podcast
Yeah, out of a
we're,
cardboard box somewhere,
we're very different.
yeah,
But yeah, but
thankfully,
I can see some people, yeah, not having the awareness, or you're right, having high hopes for it to take off like that. But yeah, you're right. I think that's something that how do you deal with that? I no, I'm just thinking like
what do you mean? Deal with?
yeah, like you're. I remember you had coached that person who had gotten to $1 million. Remember, and he had a
Oh,
million
with
dollars.
Bitcoin, right? Like rode Bitcoin all the way up and then rode it back
Yeah,
down.
yeah. So and it was that same kind of thing that he's like, it's gonna come back up. But, I did it before. It's gonna come back up.
Yeah, yeah. Before yeah, like that was on Bitcoin's first wave, and then came to me after having ridden it up and then ridden it back down, and saying like, yeah, I need some help because how do I prevent this from happening again?
Yeah, yeah.
Yeah. So the strategy to not allow that to happen again, like the strategy is super simple, right? Like you have the exit strategies that I mentioned earlier, right? Like setting a profit target, trail. If he had some kind of a profit target, and if he set some kind of trailing stops along the way, like yeah, like he would have locked in the vast majority of that. But in order to implement and execute a strategy, you need to believe in it. If
Mm.
you don't believe in it, or if there's other conflicting beliefs that you aren't aware of, then you won't be able to execute. So that's why step one is awareness, right? And so it's not just awareness of fears. It's what you need to have an awareness of all of your trading beliefs and all of your money beliefs too, because they're so intertwined.
Yeah, and like trading in a bull market is very different from trading in a bear market. So if you have that initial success,
Mm.
depending on what type of market you just started trading in, and then when it switches or changes on you, you're not prepared or you don't know how to trade in that type of environment. That's where you can find yourself, in a loss, or you don't know how to get yourself back because you had that initial success. Like, what am I doing wrong? I'm doing everything the same. What happened?
Uh, right, yeah, like trading in March 2021 is a lot different than it was in March 2020.
Absolutely, very true. So yeah, I think anything else to add? But I think yeah, these are really great ways that we can all start combating some of these fears. And it's not going to happen overnight. I think, like you even mentioned, like even with all this work that you've done, building your awareness, you even had this fear that was holding you back just a week ago. So it's not that it's going away entirely. It'll still
Yeah,
creep up, but it's just having that awareness when it does, how to identify it.
yeah. You consistent effort,
Hmm.
and there's not an endpoint to this, right? Like if you're planning to get into the market, you're planning to trade, and you're planning to be in this game for mm, a long period of time, like potentially a lifetime, then yeah, like there's no endpoint. Like it's continuing to do this kind of work, and it's very similar to martial arts, right? Like the best fighters are the best at the basics. These are the trading basics that you we need to be great at, and it's continuous practice, continuously assessing what our beliefs are, scheduling this time for ourselves, right? Like I'm doing this well kind of stuff once a month.
Yeah, I know you mentioned to me, like, yeah, when you do these initial belief exercises, you're not done. Like, yeah, that was the first run. Now you have to do it again another month or two from now as your life
Right.
changes, as beliefs change.
Right, and of course, the first time that you do it is the most challenging because it's new.
Hmm.
But each successive time, it's more familiar. It's going to be less time consuming, and it becomes easier.
Not as scary. Once
Yeah,
again,
not
talking
as
about fear,
scary.
I looked at these lists of questions that I'm doing this. I just finished Napoleon Hill's book, Think and Grow Rich. And yeah, there's a whole list of questions. I got really scared. I didn't finish the book at first. Like I closed it up because it was really taking that first look in the mirror. It's scary. It really is. Like you don't really do this type of analysis. Like we don't go to school. We don't do psychoanalysis at school. We don't do this type of work. We're not trained. So to really do this, it really is, yes, a little scary.
Yeah, it's funny that you mentioned that too. Like I remember taking psychology classes in college. I don't remember anything like these kinds of questions. It maybe touched upon in some of the philosophy classes, but not
Mm-hmm.
in psychology. That's interesting.
Yeah, yeah. So that, yeah, like I said, so but we need to do it for ourselves. Like this is important, not just for our careers, but for our family, our relationships. Like this type of work is beneficial.
Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah, for ourselves and for those around us.
And hopefully, this show is beneficial to you all today as you are continuing to find success in your trading. Be sure to subscribe to the channel to be the first to find out about our next show and interviews of top traders
Yeah,
and
yeah. Smash the
experts.
like button and subscribe to the channel. And
And for the top highlights from today's episode, be sure to go to marawealth.com. And we can't wait to see you next time.
yes, we hope that this gave you the jumpstart that you needed. Now take it and run with it.
See you next time. Bye.
Bye, everybody.